นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนะมัสสามิ Firstly, I'd ask permission from the very venerable senior bhikkhus, Thanajaan Liam, Thanajaan Bunchu, and the venerable Sangha, and also extend my blessings to all the good lay people gathered here tonight. In the last 2 days, there has been a very significant and historical event occurred in the state of Victoria, and that is the establishing of this Obosara hall, a hall for doing the Sangha business, the duties of the community of bhikkhus, the establishing of a consecrated boundary that allows that community of monks to gather together and to do official business of the Sangha, that is, for example, ordinations. And this has come about through the great effort of not only the Sangha under the guidance and leadership of Thanajaan Kalyano, but also through all of your great effort, and also the efforts of many people who are not with us tonight. And I see that as a very significant historical event, because in this land of Australia, a place that we call a lucky country, now having the establishment of the traditions of allowing a place, a land, an area concentrated to do the ordination procedures to allow people to go forth under the Buddhist teachings, for me indicates that this is not only a lucky country but a very blessed country now, in that people can go forth or can come to this monastery as lay people and practice in this hall, in a consecrated area. And this area is a sacred area. It is an area where each one of us come to find refuge. We leave the world, our duties and responsibilities of our own life, put all our busyness down and come to this quiet place, and then enter into this inner sanctum, this hall here, so that we can then reflect on our own minds, that we can then go inward into our minds, that we can go into the inner sanctum of the heart, that consecrated area which is to be found within the mind. It's the area that the Buddha said that is extremely important for human beings to touch, to get to know, to turn to. And one of his famous sayings is to become an island unto yourself, to not find refuge elsewhere, but in that inner sanctum of Dhamma, in the inner sanctum of truth. This inner sanctum of truth is what the Buddha himself discovered, saw, realized under the Bodhi tree on the night of his enlightenment, on Visakha Puja. And that inner sanctum of truth is what he taught all other beings out of compassion. Because he realized what he discovered was a universal truth that was already there. It didn't belong to anybody. But he realized it was an ancient truth that exists, but beings had not seen it yet. And it only took, a person with great parameters, great spiritual qualities, to rediscover that truth. But then by having rediscovered it for himself and become the awakened one, supremely enlightened by himself, then out of great compassion, then he pointed that same way down to us. And so now, having heard those teachings that the Buddha was awakened to, the Four Noble Truths, the Noble Eightfold Path, the pathway of generosity, the pathway of virtue, and the pathway of meditation, by pointing that out, then each and every one of us gathered here can also turn into that inner sanctum, that sacred area within yourself. And that is not you. That is not something that belongs to you. It is a universal truth which can be touched, which can be seen, which can be realized and understood. And to see into oneself, then one has to put things down that don't belong to oneself. Unburden oneself. And so, just as when we came here tonight, we had to put aside time. We had to put aside duties and responsibilities. We had to put aside the things of the world, the activities of the world, to come to the monastery. And then we had to put aside certain possessions, like our car and even our shoes, to come in. And as we actually start unburdening ourselves, then we get lighter as we come in. And then when we sit down, then we have to put aside disturbances of activity and restlessness, and to be still. And so as we're putting aside things, we're getting closer and closer to a state of stillness, peace, in the external world, in the external realms. And then when we sit meditation, we're turning the mind towards an object of meditation which will lead the mind in to states of peace. And so again, we have to put aside those things that aren't peaceful, the disturbances of the mind, the activities of thought, and turn towards that stillness, the thing that doesn't move, the thing that is peaceful and calm. And as we do this gradually, we put things down. It's not that we're trying to discover and find something else. That will happen just by putting things down. That you'll find that there is a peace there, there's a stillness there, there's an inner happiness and inner calm arises. The more you let go of things, then the more peaceful we become. Tanajan Cha, our spiritual guide and teacher, used to say that if you let go a little, then you have a little peace. If you let go a lot, then you have a lot of peace. If you let go completely, then you have complete peace. So what do we mean by letting go? Well, it comes back to this teachings of the Buddha of the Noble Eightfold Path, which is summarized, as we know, by generosity, by virtue, and by meditation. And the first thing about generosity is that it wears away the concept of who we are and what we take to be dear. Because with developing what we call dana or generosity, what we have to do is make sacrifices to be generous, don't we? We begin by giving more importance to others than to oneself. In that we're thinking, how can I make somebody else happy? How can I share with somebody else to make their lives more fulfilled? So it means that we're turning away from our own concern, from concern for the self, for me, and thinking of how can I be a blessing to others? How can I bring some happiness to the life of others? And so as we think of others and wish to share with others, then when we turn away, we let go of this self-importance. We find that there's actually happiness arising as a consequence of generosity. And you've seen maybe over the last 2 days all the lay community coming to this monastery and doing acts of dana and generosity, sharing with the Sangha their meal and gifts, but also sharing with each other the food that they've brought. And that has brought a sense of harmony, cooperation, hospitality and friendship, which is the foundation stones of metta, loving kindness. And that's what makes societies function in a wholesome and skillful way, when people are willing to share and give and to be hospitable with friendliness and warmth. And that means giving up. And as we develop these acts of generosity, there's many levels in the stages of generosity. And the first kind of generosity is when we give away what we don't need. That's relatively easy to do. And we don't want something, we have no need for it, so we give it away. The next level of generosity is when we swap. We share something because we expect something in return. It's a kind of bargaining type of generosity. I'll give to you if you give me something back. The next type of generosity is where it's a sacrificial generosity, where one is actually giving something that one considers of great worth to one, valuable to you. It's hard to give it up because you like it, you enjoy it, you value it, but you're willing to give that away. Then there's a type of generosity which is called great generosity or princely generosity, where one gives totally. That sort of generosity is like the Bodhisattva when he was practicing his qualities of generosity. He gave everything away whenever asked. If anyone asked the Bodhisattva when he was practicing, his final life before becoming the Bodhisattva, to become the Buddha, if anyone asked him, he determined he wouldn't refuse. He would always share that. That type of generosity is extreme sacrifice. And so we see that this acts of sharing and giving, it has a fundamental principle, is that it wears away at the concept of us, self, ego, as we say. It gradually wears away. What do we give importance to, and are we willing to share what we consider greatly important with other human beings and even animals? So that's why even the Buddha said for the monks that a monk, even if he takes the few rice grains in the bottom of the bowl that's left over after the meal, he should make a determination when he washes that bowl out and throws the rice grains away. May this be for the benefit of the ants or the animals, the insects that may take it. He said even that would be great blessing for that person. So acts of generosity are extremely important. But the other thing that the Buddha said that is extremely important is virtue. And we know that the foundations of the 5 precepts is an act of kindness. The Buddha describes in the suttas that a person that keeps the 5 precepts, that person, for example, who gives up the act of killing, that person is acting out of compassion. They're giving other beings the freedom from fear that they will harm them. That is an act of compassion. They don't steal or take what's not given. They're giving other living beings the freedom of fear that you'll take from them. Committing sexual misconduct, you're giving others, when you keep that precept to refrain from sexual misconduct, you're giving others the freedom from fear that you'll break their relationships and destroy their trust. When one keeps the 4th precept, the precept to refrain from untruthful or harmful speech, then one's giving other beings the freedom from fear that you'll deceive them, you'll lie to them. When refraining from drugs and alcohol, one's giving other beings the freedom from fear that you harm them through carelessness or heedlessness. And so we see that this is actually a gift, an act of generosity, act of compassion, the Buddha said, when we have a foundation in virtue. And this foundation in virtue is the base for all goodness to arise. Just as this hole here, to be built up, it has to have a solid, steady foundation for the structure to be built and to survive and to last a long time. And so too, the growth in everything that is good and wholesome and true has to have a foundation in the psychological qualities of virtue. Because virtue brings up positive psychological states, and the lack of virtue does the opposite. The lack of virtue brings up guilt and remorse, a lack of self-worth, and that leads to depression and sadness. Whereas virtue leads to the opposite. It leads to a sense of well-being, a sense of not finding fault within oneself. And so that becomes a refuge, that becomes a spiritual sanctum in the mind, a consecrated area of kindness and virtue. And that consecrated area within the mind of kindness and virtue then becomes the basis, the foundation for the development of meditation, to developing more refined psychological states which are based in peace and insight. When we're going to develop the mind in clarity, insight and understanding, then we need to be calming the mind first. And that is why we take up a mental subject, an object of meditation. That subject or object of meditation is the pathway. It's the source for leading the mind into peace. But before we can get our minds to states of peace, we have to put down the burdens of the mind first. And what are the burdens of the mind? The first burden of the mind is who we take ourselves to be. Because when you come to sit in this hall and you want to become peaceful, you carry with you into the hall all your perceptions of who you are, the ideas of a self. And the idea of the self is the concept of your personality, your responsibilities, your history, your biography, and then also your desires and wishes, and then all the activities that you plan as well, the becoming of the self. And so before we're going to be able to make ourselves peaceful, is we have to put things down. One time I asked a sculptor who used to sculpture Buddha images out of wood, and he could sculpture very beautiful images just like the image on the shrine here. And carving out of wood is very difficult, because if you make one mistake you can destroy the image. If you pour or mould an image you can make repairs afterwards, but with a wooden image it's much more difficult. And so I asked this sculptor, how do you carve the Buddha image out of wood? And he said, you just take away everything that's not a Buddha. That's quite a profound statement, because that's what we're doing in meditation. We're taking away everything that is not the enlightened mind. We're giving up everything that is false, which is an illusion of self, which is an illusion of the world. You can't reach out for something you don't yet know. You can only give up what you know. And so when we want to be peaceful, one of the first things that we have to do when we sit meditation is give up all our perceptions of who we take ourselves to be. So you give up the idea that I am a man or a woman when you sit meditation in this consecrated hall. When you come in here, you give up the idea that I am from this country or that country, this age, I have this job, this position, these responsibilities. Because if you don't, when you come in here and you think, I am the boss of this office, then when you sit down and meditate, you start thinking about all the things you haven't done in the office. When you come and sit into the consecrated area here, you have to make the mind consecrated. Is where you put down all your activities of who you take yourself to be. There's nobody there, nothing to do, nowhere to go. Therefore you can be still. For example, if Ajahn Kalyano goes back to his hut, there's a very beautiful hut on the hill, he shuts the door, he puts down the idea that he's the abbot of this monastery when he enters that door, because he has made that his consecrated area. If he goes up to that hut and thinks that he's the abbot, then he'll have all the burdens of the abbot when he shuts his eyes. All the responsibilities, all the duties, all the work and activities of arranging this wonderful ceremony we've had over the last 2 days. But because he knows the Buddha's path, he puts all that down. And I use that as an example so that you can understand what I'm talking about. When you come into the hall, don't be the doer. Put down the manager, put down the husband, put down the wife, put down the student, the worker, the adult, the child. Put all that aside. Don't be anybody. Because the idea of a self is who you think you are. We define ourselves by I am this person, this biography, this age, this history. When we put that down, then we're freed of that burden. And so that's the first thing you need to put down when you start to sit meditation, is you take away everything that's not the Buddha. Take away everything that's not the peaceful mind. You take away everything that is not blissful, serene and calm. And the next thing is you have to put down is all the wants. Want nothing from the world. Because if you come into this sacred area and you still have all these desires and wants, as you sit here, it will be impossible to make the mind peaceful. I want this rise in my job, I want this pay increase, I want security, I want peace, I want to be happy, I want people to love me, I want people to be kind. If we want all those material, physical, psychological things, and then we also don't want the things that we dislike, then we're carrying all that burden into this sacred place. And this sacred place, when it gets loaded up with everyone's wants, will be the world again. So what we have to do is leave all our wants and desires outside. So when you come into meditation and you want to be peaceful, the way to wanting to be peaceful is to give up your desires. So when you sit, you want nothing from this world. Develop that thought when you sit meditation. I want nothing from this world. Not demanding the world to be the way I want it, or to be otherwise, but just to know the world, to stay with the knower. Ajahn Chai used to always say, stay with the Puru, the one who knows. They're just the knower in the mind, the knowing in the mind. That knowing in the mind which just knows the present moment. Doesn't go to the past or the future, but just stays with the present moment. And when we give up the wants, that is an expression of self, isn't it? It's the self that's demanding. I want this for me, I want that for others. I like this, I don't like that. If we have the attitude, I want nothing from this world, when you develop that thought, that concept, the mind becomes calm. You're whittling away everything that's not Dhamma. You're whittling away everything that's not the Buddha. It's like that famous story of the children playing, and they find a bottle with the genie in the bottle, and the genie comes out of the bottle, and he asks the first child, I can grant you any wish. What do you wish for? And the child has been playing for a long time. It's hot and sweaty and says, I'd love an ice cream. And sure enough, an ice cream appears in the child's hand. He asks the next child, what would you like? And that child is a bit smarter and says, I'd love an ice cream factory so I can have ice cream at any time. And sure enough, he's the owner of an ice cream factory. He asks the next child, what would you like? And of course, desire arises, greed arises in the children, and the others get envious. And he thinks, I would like an ice cream factory, McDonald's, a Hamburger King, and a toy factory as well. And of course, he gets all those. And then asks the next child, what would you like? And he thinks, I'd like $1 billion so I could buy anything I want. And all the others are jealous, this one is really smart. And then they turn to the genie turns to the last child and says, what would you want? What's your wish? And he says, I wish to be free from all wishes. That child has the thoughts of the Buddha. He's inclining in the way that the Buddha taught. And that child is really the wealthy child. To be free from all craving. That leads to peace. And we see that when we put down our desires, put down our wants and needs and demands, then there's peace. The next quality of mind that we need to develop when we come into this holy place is the thought, I don't want to go anywhere in this world. Because if you develop the thought, as you sit meditation, don't want to go anywhere. Don't want to go into the past. I don't want to go into the future in the mind. Then you'll find that the mind will stop spinning to the past and future. And if the mind stops spinning thinking about the past and stop spinning to proliferate about the future, speculate about that, then it will come back to the present moment. And you'll be able to see the present moment. And when we have the attitude that you don't want to go anywhere in the world, then there's a sense of contentment arises. A contentment to be just here, right now. When we don't want to go anywhere, we find that we're still. And to develop a sense of stillness, there needs to be contentment in the mind. The Buddha said that he saw no other quality that leads to the arising of unwholesome states as the quality of discontentment. And he saw no other quality that led to the arising of wholesome states as the quality of contentment. So the idea that there's nowhere to go, this is good enough. And certainly this space is good enough. When there's a sense of not looking for anywhere to go, just happy to be still here and now and content in the present moment, then stillness arises, because the expression of self, of ego, is to go, to do, to act. I will go, I will do this, I will act. And by being still, we're chipping away that sense of I. As we wear away the sense of the actor, the doer, and then peace can arise. And we can see more clearly, as that peace arises, into the nature of the world. That actually, as Venerable Sariputta was told by the Venerable Assaji Sariputta when he was not yet a Buddhist, he met a Buddhist monk named Assaji on Bindabat, on alms round, and he saw his demeanour, his manner was composed and serene. It was very inspiring. And he was seeking a teacher. He was looking for truth. So he approached him and asked him about his teachings. And he said that his teacher is the Buddha. And so he asked, what does the Buddha teach? And he said, I'll give a summary. Assaji was fully enlightened. And he gave the summary that all conditioned things, all things arise because of conditions and cease because of conditions. And the Buddha knows those conditioned processes. That there wasn't a self there wasn't a being there that was causing things to arise. But it rises because of a cause and ceases because of a cause. And so as we start to become more peaceful, more calm, then we can have the insight into Dhamma just as Sariputta did at that time. We can start to see that it's not a self doing this, it's not a self causing this, that it's just arising from wholesome causes. So this coming together here is one of the causes for your development on the path to truth. By coming to a place like this, by paying reverence to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, by chanting, by meditating, making the mind peaceful, by listening to Dhamma talks, that is steps on the path. It is nurturing the mind towards states of liberation, nurturing the mind towards states of peace and insight, because these are the causes. Things arise because of causes and cease because of causes. You are creating the wholesome causes for the mind to develop towards truth. And so if one develops these three attitudes of mind, the attitude of there's no one there, you put down all your burdens when you come into this inner sanctum. There's nothing to desire from this world, and there's nowhere to go. Then you'll find that you've cut away, you've chipped away of all those things that are not peaceful. And then the mind will go to one-pointedness. Will easily become composed and serene and still. And when it does, then happiness and rapture arises. And from that, those deep states of what we call samadhi, peace, then when one comes out of that, and one has to pick up the burdens of the world, you have to leave this inner sanctum and go home, and you see the arising nature of things, you see the things changing all the time, then you can have insight into the nature of existence. The things are constantly changing, in a constant state of change and flux. And that because of that change, everything ceasing and disintegrating, there's instability there, then it's unsatisfactory, there's imperfection in that thing which is ceasing and disintegrating. And because there's imperfection there, and it's not worthy of calling a self, it's not worthy of saying, I own this, if it's going to disintegrate and disappear. And so we leave it alone, we put it all down, we turn away from it. The mind does that naturally, turns away from the world, turns away from these conditioned phenomena, these sankharas, which are ceasing. And it seeks that which doesn't cease. And that's when we're getting into the inner sanctum of the mind, into the pure states of the mind. And so this evening we've come to listen to Dhamma so we can turn our mind into that, the peaceful state, so we can come an island unto ourselves, find that inner sanctum of peace, serenity, calm and insight within this heart and this mind. And that is possible, the Buddha said. There is a pathway, a very clear pathway of generosity, virtue and meditation, which leads into that inner sanctum. And so here at this monastery, Buddha Bodhivana, we have this wonderful new hall here, which has been consecrated by the Sangha and all the lay people here. The purpose of this hall is to facilitate your practice, our practice of Dhamma. Because we all know that this hall, doesn't matter how beautiful we make it, the whole will never become enlightened. But it's those beings, those people that come into this hall that can become enlightened. It's the chittas, the minds, the hearts of all of us that can understand the Dhamma. So the people, the chittas, the minds, the hearts of all of you who are in this hall are the most important aspect of this building. This most important aspect of this inner sanctum, this inner space. Because these hearts can know truth. Just as the Buddha has known the truth, just as all the enlightened ones, both men and women, have known the truth. And just as good people in this day and age can know the truth. And we can see that in the examples of the good Kuba-Achans, the good teachers, who through their example, through their life, that is committed to Dhamma, are like the ones who lead the path. And so for me, being an Australian who is ordained as a Buddhist monk, to come back to Australia after 30 years and see the development of Buddhism here and to take part in this ceremony is very inspiring. When I was first interested in Buddhism in 1976, I went to the Buddhist Society of Adelaide, and there was 5 members. I was number 6. So to then 32 years later, to then see a gathering like this in a Uposatha hall, in a community like this, and a gathering of the Sangha here, is very uplifting to see the development of the Buddhist teachings in this country. And we can all consider ourselves very fortunate and therefore very blessed to have that opportunity to hear the Dhamma and then now to practice that Dhamma right here in this environment. And so I wish every one of you all success in your practice. May you turn to the inner sanctum within your mind, not only when you come to the monastery here, but take that inner sanctum home with you. Don't leave it when you go out the door. Take that inner sanctum of generosity, virtue, and meditation with you wherever you go. Thank you.